want to introduce Mary Wildham, the Program Manager for the Arbor Day Foundation. Good morning, Mary.
Morning. Thanks, everybody, for being here.
Before we get started, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the GoToWebinar system and how we're going to run the presentation today. Everyone who's attending is on an automatic mute, so you don't need to worry about any background noise on your part. But just because we can't hear your voice doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. If you have a question, if you'd like us to go over something, if you've had any successes or challenges using VolunteerMatch in the past, you're welcome to contact us using the question tool in your GoToWebinar toolbar. You should see the word questions with either a plus sign or an arrow sign next to it. You could open that up, type in your question, and we'll be keeping track of that today as we go through the presentation and stopping periodically to answer those questions. All right. Mary, do you want to sort of introduce us today and kick us off?
Sure. Thank you. Like Jennifer said, my name's Mary, and we're really excited at the Arbor Day Foundation to provide this opportunity to help connect nonprofit organizations to different volunteers throughout the country who are really engaged and excited about helping plant trees and care for trees in their communities. And this all started because we were trying to find a way that we could really engage our members and other people in the community that continually call us and want to know how they can get involved. And also at the same time, we have nonprofit organizations that we work with that are trying to find out how they can connect with those people. So we worked with VolunteerMatch to create this system so that all the people, anybody who wants to participate has to do is go to the arbordaynow.org volunteer center. They type in their zip code and it brings up all the different opportunities in their community. And you as a nonprofit have the exciting opportunity to be a part of that as posting your environmental opportunities, because they will automatically be filtered from VolunteerMatch into our volunteer center. And what we're doing for our nonprofit organizations is, because we rely so heavily on you, and you are truly the experts in tree planting and management and volunteer engagement, we'd like to give you an added benefit that as you're posting these opportunities and letting us know that you're doing this, we will give you an automatic upgrade to a free community leader status, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. Jennifer will touch on that. But all in all, just thank you so much for the work that you guys are doing to give people that opportunity to really make an impact within their own communities and inspire people to plant, nurture, and celebrate trees.
Great. Thanks, Mary. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk a little bit today about online recruiting in general. If you are new to online recruiting, and we're going to talk. Sorry, we've got a cable car. We'll talk a little bit about some of those best practices for recruiting online, sort of in general, but with an eye towards using VolunteerMatch. We're going to take a look at some real opportunities on VolunteerMatch, as well as we'll talk about how to post the listing, get started, and talk a little bit about how to use some of those great community leader tools that the Arbor Day Foundation is going to make available to you. Then, as I mentioned, we'll be hearing from a couple of your peers from tree planting organizations and some tips and tricks from the field, if you will. And then, as I mentioned, we have plenty of time for questions, so go ahead and type those in as they occur to you. All right, before we take a look at VolunteerMatch, I wanted to talk just briefly about recruiting online. And I've been at VolunteerMatch for a little over 5 years now, and we've been talking. When I first started, we didn't have a lot of information about recruiting online from the volunteer manager's perspective. And one of the first things that I did was take a look at how our nonprofits were using VolunteerMatch and try to frame up what we could figure out about recruiting online. And I did a survey and asked volunteer managers that were using VolunteerMatch to provide some feedback on what their best recruitment strategies and recruitment tools were. What we found is that VolunteerMatch and online recruitment in general was just another tool in their toolbox. Volunteer managers were telling me overwhelmingly that word of mouth was the best way that they were getting volunteers. And that may be true for your organizations and your programs as well. It's friends telling friends, family members, there's word out in the community. So we're going to talk today about recruiting volunteers online who may not know much about your organization and maybe don't know what you do or why planting trees in your community is important. When we started putting together these best practices, I took a look at some opportunities on VolunteerMatch, the listings that were posted on our site, and we're going to take a look at that in just a minute so you can see what I'm talking about. But we took a look at 100 of those listings that were really popular, lots of referrals. That's our connection, what we call a connection between a volunteer and a nonprofit. So opportunities that were really popular. And then I took a look at 100 listings that nobody was interested in. And we took a look at what was the same between those two groups, what we could infer, what we could deduct from what we were seeing. And then we started thinking about online communication. So some of what we're going to talk about today with best practices is really about communicating online and how that might be different from some of the other ways that you communicate with volunteers or just communication in general. Then, as I mentioned, most of these best practices are really going to apply to any sort of online recruitment site that you're using, if you're using Craigslist or if you're using your local volunteer center's website. But we are going to talk about best practices specifically with VolunteerMatch in mind, since we do have such a great relationship with the Arbor Day Foundation. All right. So we're going to go over these best practices, and then we're going to jump into VolunteerMatch and see them work. And if you think about online recruiting, if you think about searching on the internet, which is really what this is, volunteers come to VolunteerMatch, they search for opportunities. They may or may not know what they're looking for. The first time you have the opportunity to grab a volunteer's attention is with your title. So you want to make sure that your title is working for you. Maybe it's catchy or fun. It could be interesting or ask a question. Something that might catch someone's attention, draw their attention to your listing as opposed to someone else's listing. When we go on and take a look at VolunteerMatch, you can see in some places, especially in our major metro areas, there can be thousands of opportunities out there for volunteers to search through. So you want to make sure that yours stands out. So the first time you have a chance to really grab a volunteer's attention is the title. What we found is that if you can be a little creative or be a little descriptive, it can really pay off in the end. The next thing that we found about those listings that were super successful is that they were to the point and they were brief. They weren't trying to smash all of their open volunteer positions into one listing. They were creating one opportunity per listing and really crafting that message. What we found in our description box of VolunteerMatch is that about 100 words is what you're aiming for. Now, if you end up a little bit more than that, probably okay, but what we are trying to get across here is that it's not the great American novel. This is not paragraphs and paragraphs of text. If you've ever done a search for something on Google and you click on a link thinking that it's what you want and you just get a wall of words, you just back out and you close that and you think that's not what I'm looking for. I'm just skimming for information. People are mostly skimming for information online, so you want to make sure that you're making those words count and that you're making your first few sentences count. And this is one of the things that we'll see on VolunteerMatch. The first few sentences of your description show up in search results. So you want to make sure that you are leading with the good stuff, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So when you think about those 100 words, you want to make sure that you're using language that's easy to understand, that you're not using any programmatic language or any internal terms, and that you're making it welcoming language, that you're really talking the language of your prospective volunteers. You don't want to use any jargon. If you have acronyms, you want to make sure that you describe them or explain what that means if it's not really self-evident. And you want to think about using keywords. Lots of times the words that we use to describe our programs may be professional language or formal language. It may not be what the average person on the street might say. You might have terminology that you talk about conservation and environmental impact and removal of non-native species, those kinds of things. But really what an average person might want to be interested in might type in a keyword along the lines of, tree planting or park cleanup, something like that. So you want to make sure that those words show up, those general, more colloquial terms are showing up in your description as well, so that they act as keywords. and I'll show you how that works on VolunteerMatch when we go onto the site. This next one is really important. So often as volunteer managers, we forget to tell our prospective volunteers why what we do is important. And unlike those volunteers who find you through word of mouth, or maybe have had a friend or a family member who volunteered with you, or can see your work in their community with the new trees that are being planted, volunteers that find you online often have no real solid idea or understanding of why what you do is important. So make sure you answer that question for a volunteer. Why should they spend their morning with you? We've got Andy Meeks from Portland, and his listing he talks about it's going to be rainy probably a lot in Portland. So you don't just tell them those details of, make sure you bring your raincoat, but you want to talk about why adding trees to your community can make your community a better place. And don't forget that strong call to action. Get involved now, make a difference today, whatever it is that is going to appeal to volunteers to get them excited about the work that you're doing and how they can make a difference. If you have restrictions, if you have time commitments, if there's going to be training, if you have limits to group size, if you have age limits, make sure you provide that in your description. You don't have to go into a ton of detail, but make sure that, if a Girl Scout troop leader has a bunch of 10 and 12-year-olds that want to come out and plant trees, that they know when they see your listing that you can only accommodate volunteers over the age of 16. So those kinds of things can be really important. Again, you don't have to dig into all the details, but provide as much as you can in directions, if there's support that you need from volunteers or that volunteers need from you, so that they have an idea if they're going to be a good fit for your program. You don't want someone to get excited about your program and want to get involved only to learn later down the line that they're not eligible or that they can't bring their large group or they're not old enough to volunteer with your organization. We're going to take a look at some opportunities online. And one of the things that's so important when you think about telling your message, telling your story, representing your organization online is that it's visually appealing. We've got some great examples of pictures today that you can see of volunteers in action. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and you have this opportunity to include a picture. It's really easy to do. If you can add an attachment to an email, you can add a picture to your VolunteerMatch account. And what we found works really well is pictures of volunteers in action. So imagine, if you will, people digging in the dirt, hands in the dirt, planting a seedling, or volunteers with shovels, or a before and after of trees that have been planted and the difference it's made to the community. As much as your logo is probably beautiful, as much as those great pictures of volunteers standing around with their arms around each other at the end of a long day's work are important and should be shared on Facebook or with your volunteers, they're not the best pictures to put on VolunteerMatch. They're not the best pictures for recruiting. You really want to show volunteers in action. We also have a Google map that you can turn on. So if you have a park nearby, or if there's a location that you're working in, show your volunteers where that opportunity is taking place so that they know how far they have to travel, or if it's near to maybe where they need to do their shopping or run errands, or if it's an area that they particularly care about. And then, just like we talked about before about using words, about 3 paragraphs of 3 sentences or less, you want to think about making good use of that white space. So we give you tools for bulleting. If you want to add that in using bulleting, you can to make some additional space. But really think about making it easy to read. Again, remember that volunteers are skimming for information. They want to be able to find what's important to them easily. I mentioned that you want to think about how you're representing your organization and the work that you do, potentially to an audience that doesn't know much about your work or why it's important. And so this is oftentimes your first chance to make a good impression on a prospective volunteer. Do you remember I talked about those 100 opportunities that nobody was interested in? They didn't have any referrals. 100% of them had spelling errors, and 80% of them had grammar mistakes. This is your first chance to make a good impression on a prospective volunteer. Make sure you're not representing your organization with spelling errors and grammar mistakes. We give you a spell check tool so that there's no excuse for spelling errors. If you're worried about grammar, you're always welcome to write your opportunities in Word and then cut and paste them into your VolunteerMatch account so that you can be sure that you're not making any mistakes in there. You want to make sure that you're really viewing your listing as if you were a prospective volunteer. Use that critical eye. Challenge yourself. With 100 words, you want to make sure every word counts. So go in there and really ask yourself, what could I do better? What could I say that could be more compelling? What's my call to action? What's that impact statement that I want to share with a prospective volunteer? And then, ask someone outside of your department, ask someone outside of your organization maybe to take a look at your opportunity and provide some feedback. Because again, lots of times we know what we're saying. We live and breathe our programs. We speak our own language in so many cases. You want to make sure that it's easy to understand from an outsider's perspective. Can you understand what I'm asking? Do you understand when you're supposed to be somewhere, where you're supposed to be, what you need to do to be a successful volunteer for this opportunity or for this event? And then finally today, I'm really going to be talking about taking some time to craft your opportunities on VolunteerMatch so that you're attracting the volunteers that you want, the volunteers that are the best volunteers for your program. And you're only going to know that this is working if volunteers click that I want to help button at the bottom of each VolunteerMatch listing, and we'll show you how that works so that you can really see that. So don't put your contact information in your listing. Make sure that you're using the system. There's a couple of reasons we'll go in and I'll show you how you can keep track of your referrals too, so that you can see who's referred themselves and keep information on prospective volunteers. All right, we're going to go and take a look at VolunteerMatch, but I just wanted to see, and Lauren, do you know if we've had any questions? All right. Great. So we'll jump in to VolunteerMatch. So this is our homepage, and as I mentioned, most of our volunteers find us this way. They do a Google search, they do a Yahoo search, they come to an opportunity, or they come to our website on our homepage. About 80% of the searches that we get on VolunteerMatch are location-based searches only, and I mentioned keywords, and we'll talk about that in just a minute too. Most of the time it's a city. It can also be a zip code or a region. I'm going to do a search here in San Francisco. We usually have around 1,800 opportunities in the metro area, so that's within 20 miles of San Francisco. It's a busy day on VolunteerMatch. We've got 1,924. So if you are in a metro area, you might find that there's a lot more competition out there for volunteers than if you're in a more suburban or rural area. And if you haven't gone onto VolunteerMatch and done some searching and seen what VolunteerMatch is like in your community, really strongly encourage you to do that. How many other opportunities are out there? Do some searches. How many other environmental groups are out there, or conservation or tree planting opportunities are in your area? Not that it's necessarily competition, but it's good to know what's going on in VolunteerMatch in your area. As I mentioned, those titles are the first opportunity that you have to grab a volunteer. And then you can see that there are those first few sentences show up. And you might be thinking, gosh, I have so much to do. I have all these programs to run. Earth Day is coming up. Arbor Day is coming up. How will I have time to create those impact statements or to think about those calls to action? This can be a really great job for a volunteer. You can give a volunteer access to your VolunteerMatch account so that they can go in and update these opportunities for you. But in lots of cases, you know those impact statements. You know those calls to action because you have those conversations every day with prospective volunteers. So it's almost as if you're having a conversation with someone, but that conversation is happening on VolunteerMatch. All right, let's go in and take a look at some tree opportunities. So as I mentioned, about 20% of our searches include keywords. We often get asked, what kind of keywords do volunteers type in? And volunteers can type in any kind of keywords that they want. Essentially, this is just like a little Google search. Sometimes we get very specific searches, but most of the time they're general. And maybe somebody wants to do some tree planting. They might type in tree planting, do a search. Looks like they've got some organizations here in the Bay Area that are doing some tree planting. And I actually, we're going to hear from Meredith King in just a couple of minutes, but I wanted to actually use her opportunity as an example, and she's up in Sacramento. Oops, I think, are we getting a little feedback over there? So here you can see the Sacramento Tree Foundation, and they've got a few. Let's see. David, are you getting feedback too?
Yes,
all
a
right.
little bit.
Looks like I'm going to mute people. All right. Sorry about that for the feedback. We do sometimes get, we have a lot of panelists on the phone today, so sometimes we get things that happen in the background. So here you can see the Sacramento Tree Foundation, and I'm just going to use this as an example today. This is the Sacramento Tree Foundation's organization profile page. So everyone who has, every organization that has an account has a profile page. You can set it up, put your mission statement in here, a little description of who you are and what you do. If you have a map, it looks like maybe they've turned their map off. This is where you'll have your contact information as the volunteer coordinator. And here you can see they don't have any reviews yet. If you have volunteers that you think would do a good job of recommending your organization to other volunteers, it's a great activity. Have them come on and just write a little review of who you are and what you do or what they like doing with your organization. You can see it's really simple. They can do star rating or they can write a little something to really help other volunteers. So if you don't have any reviews yet, that can be a great project, again, to have volunteers participate with your VolunteerMatch account. And if you have an old account, you might want to double check, make sure this information is all up to date, so that if a volunteer tries to contact you or wants to learn more about your organization, they have access to that information. All right, let's take a look at this opportunity that Meredith has created. This is a great picture of volunteers in action, down in the dirt, pictures of the trees. If you don't have these pictures already, or you mostly have those group shots or the faraway shots, don't feel like you can't create these. You can get your volunteers together or even staff people and have them create these pictures so that it looks like volunteers in action. You can see the impact of what the volunteers are doing. Meredith has done a nice job of really selling that impact statement and including that call to action. Are you looking for a way to get your hands in the dirt while doing something great for our community and environment? Asking this question can be a really great way to pull a volunteer in. I really like her title here too, Get Down and Dirty. You know, it's going to appeal to certain people. It's not going to appeal to everyone. But as you probably know, not every volunteer is the right volunteer for your program. All right. So you can see she's done a good job here, and she might have some other things to add about her requirements 13 and up. You can see the bulleting, a nice use of that. It's more than 100 words, but not a lot. Again, it's not a big novel. And she's done a good job of making sure that if there are those restrictions, so it looks like you have to go through, there's a gated community, there's some specific information that makes sense to a volunteer. I like the way she's put things together, again, what you should bring, what you should expect. She's done a good job of outlining that work, again, you know, the where, the when, and then a good match for. And if you do have opportunities that are good for teams or for groups, we know that those kinds of volunteers particularly have a hard time. That's what these little icons are. You can specify that so volunteers can find you. I mentioned making sure that volunteers click I want to help, and that's this button here. I click on the I want to help button. Now I'm logged in as a demonstration account, and you can see If I wasn't, I would either set up a quick account or I would log into my account. Volunteers always have the opportunity to write you a note, ask you a question, share some additional information. And Meredith is using our custom questions, which is part of our community leader program. And she's just asking if volunteers have volunteered with her before. So yes or no, you can make these questions required or optional. You can attach up to 3. And you could ask questions like this that are sort of basic. You might ask questions about a group. If you're bringing a group, how large of a group? What's the name of the group? You know, do you have any physical limitations? Things that you might need to know ahead of time when before you talk to a volunteer or before a volunteer comes out. I'm not going to refer myself to Meredith's opportunity, so I'm going to cancel that out. I want to show you really quickly how to access your account and how to post a listing. And we'll go into the account, and then I'm going to turn it over to our tree planting expert. So this is a demonstration account, as I mentioned. And this is an opportunity that's actually for one that Andy, who's going to be speaking today, sent over. And I'm just going to show you this one here pretty quickly. Again, great picture, volunteers in action. You can see them planting trees. You can see that difference that they're making. Good calls to action with the 250 with the exclamation point. I like that. That's a lot of trees to be planting. Please arrive by 8:45. Again, that information. I'm going to go in and actually show you how to edit this one so you don't have to watch me type. This is the VolunteerMatch listing form, the listing wizard. Put in your title, again, something creative. And when you access this listing flow, you're going to get some tips in the flow. So a lot of what we've talked about today, some examples to help you get your mind going. Contacts, you can have as many contacts for your account as you want, but you can have one contact per listing. So this is the person who gets that email, that when you click send, that email will come to this person with the volunteer's contact information. I mentioned the description field, about 100 words, the bolding tool, italicized tool. I think both Meredith and Andy have done a great job of using it judiciously. If you've ever tried to read anything all in bold, it can be really tough online. Here's our spell check tool. So again, no excuses for having misspellings in your listing. Keywords, if there's other words that you've used that you haven't used in your description or your title that you think might be a good word, gardening, outdoors, you know, gardening particularly. Somebody who's interested in doing gardening might not think of tree planting necessarily, but if they type gardening into those keyword search, this opportunity would come back because we've attached gardening as a keyword. Environment, community, make sure that those are, the environment section is checked. Slowly. We're going to move on to the where and when. And you can see, you can set up an address ahead of time. You can have, if you do have virtual opportunities, and those are ones that can be done from anywhere, maybe you need a new logo or need a new website, you can recruit those as well for your tree planting organization. One-time opportunities or date range, if you're doing a week, you can put the start time and end time in if you'd like. If you have ongoing events at a park, maybe you're out there doing non-native removal on a regular basis and people can come by every week or every weekend, you can have an ongoing and flexible opportunity. I'm going to move to the next section, which is all about those requirements I mentioned. Minimum ages, if your opportunities are suitable for some of those types of volunteers that I mentioned. And then you can specify group size. So if you can take large groups, they struggle so much to find opportunities. And then if you have special skills that are required, maybe you're looking for someone to come in and do some landscaping or to help you do some planning. You can look for those kinds of specific skills using our drop-down menu, or you can type in your own using the other box, and you can have up to 6 skills. And then if you have specific requirements, do you need volunteers to be a certain age? Do you expect volunteers to commit to a certain amount of time? Do they need to come to a training ahead of time? It can be an easy way to give volunteers the information they need. This is where you add a photo, Again, I mentioned that it's easy to do, like adding an attachment. It looks like maybe our photo library is full. So we'll have Lauren delete one, and we'll come back and take a look at how to add that. This is so important and so easy. But we're going to push through to the community leader tools, and I mentioned that Meredith was using the community leader tools with the custom questions. You can set up as many questions as you want. This can be just like if you've used SurveyMonkey or anything along those lines that's familiar to you. You can pick what kind of question you want, and as I mentioned, you can make it optional or required. And we'll just grab one. If I wanted to make it required, I would check this box. You can add a custom confirmation email. This is also part of our community leader program. I mentioned when somebody clicks I want to help that an email comes to you with their contact information. An email goes to them with your message as well, and using the custom confirmation email, you can really customize that, reiterate things. You must be 13. Please arrive promptly at 8:45. This is a gated community. Make sure you park somewhere. So you can really reinforce some of that information. I like to put my personal contact information in the confirmation email as well, so that a volunteer can quickly call me, particularly day of. If something happens on the way, if you're running late, flat tires, all those kinds of things happen, let them have my number so they can reach me that day. And then if you want to attach a document, if there's a map, if there's a waiver that a volunteer needs to sign, if you want them to review something before they come, you can attach up to 3 documents. All right. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and we'll go back and add a photo, since it really is that easy thing to do. Go, pop back. So here you can see upload new. I can go in and browse. Just like I said, it's like adding an attachment. So this is an adult literacy photo, but it's right here on my desktop. I'm going to click open. Your photos need to be 1 megabyte or smaller, which is actually really large for the web. You can give it a title. As you saw in our drop-down menu, you want to make sure it's a title that you can pick from a drop-down list, so something that makes sense to you. Photo 1 or that alphanumeric code that comes with your camera is probably not a best bet unless you have really great memory. And then you want to add a caption. This can be a really great way to reinforce that impact statement, reinforce that call to action. Once you click continue, it'll upload and it'll show up in your library. So really easy to do. I wanted to quickly see if we had any questions before I turned it over to our experts from the tree planting world.
Hey Jennifer, it's David.
Hi David.
Hi everyone, this is David at VolunteerMatch. I work with Arbor Day as well. We had a good question come in from Stephanie here. She's asking if we should set up a volunteer opportunity for kind of a long-term basis, or should events only be created for each actual volunteer event?
That's a really great question, and I think it sort of depends on if you can use volunteers on an ongoing basis. If you can use volunteers sort of day in and day out, I would probably set up an opportunity that is an ongoing and flexible opportunity. But then I think I would also set up an opportunity specifically around that date and that event, because we know that volunteers come in and search for opportunities on specific days. So that can be a great way to have that ongoing interest, so that if you always have an opportunity up, then you create one specifically for a big push around maybe a big tree planting that you're doing. We saw the one with Meredith with 250 trees, or was that Andy? Both of them, I think, had 250 trees that they were planting. So, big pushes around those specific days where you could set up a more generic one that just sort of lives on VolunteerMatch for people who are interested in an ongoing basis, as long as you have opportunities for them to actually get involved. So you wouldn't want to put something up if there aren't any tree planting opportunities coming up for a few weeks.
Right. Great. Thanks, Jennifer. I also wanted to see if you can go to arbordaynow.volunteermatch.org. Everybody, this is Arbor Day has its own volunteer center that we've partnered with here. So every time you make a listing on volunteermatch.org, these listings also show up here on the Arbor Day Foundation's Volunteer Center site. And basically, you'll need to make sure you check the environment checkbox that Jennifer pointed out before. And also, it would be beneficial if you put tree or trees as a keyword. Those will then get highlighted on this particular Volunteer Center site. So Arbor Day is going to be doing their own promotions around this particular page, and also letting people know about the VolunteerMatch.org site as well.
So volunteers will be directed here. They can come in, and those opportunities on VolunteerMatch will be fed into this site.
Yeah, so your listings are basically showing up in 2 different places, so it gets a huge audience for all your tree planting opportunities.
All right. Great. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Leland first to introduce our tree planting recruitment expert. Oh, I think I have to unmute him. Sorry, Leland. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Thanks very much, Jennifer, and thanks to Mary as well. Alliance for Community Trees, we're really excited about this new opportunity for local tree planting community organizations to reach out and access a new audience of potential volunteers. We're really excited to partner with Arbor Day, and I think the arbordaynow.org volunteer match new web portal is going to present a great opportunity for tree planting nonprofits, not just for Alliance for Community Trees member groups like Sacramento Tree Foundation and Friends of Trees, but for just local community nonprofits or even school groups, whoever might be doing tree planting anywhere. We have found that lots of corporations are using VolunteerMatch to plan their corporate employee engagement in volunteer activities, and to be part of those, your organization needs to be on VolunteerMatch and posting your events on VolunteerMatch. So by using VolunteerMatch, as Jennifer just showed us, you'll automatically get entered into the Arbor Day Now Volunteer Center, and it just opens the door to lots of great opportunities for getting seen and for getting your projects out there. And to tell us a little bit today about how they're already using VolunteerMatch and recruiting volunteers online, we have 2 excellent Alliance for Community Trees member organizations. We have Meredith King, who's the volunteer coordinator from Sacramento Tree Foundation, based in Sacramento, California. And at SacTree, they recruit and manage community members to fill an average of 3,000 volunteer spots each year in all kinds of ways, not just tree planting, but also through volunteer opportunities for kids, tree tours, fundraising, internships, green space training. So we're really excited to have Meredith join us. And then from Portland, Oregon, Andy Meeks, who's the volunteer and outreach manager of the nonprofit Friends of Trees, another stellar and leading tree planting organization. And they also recruit volunteers all year round in all parts of their work, from planting to planning. And some of their opportunities for volunteers include, not just digging in the dirt, but also for loading for and preparation for events, registration, photography, summer festival tabling, interns, inspectors, and often volunteers. So there are so many ways to get people involved in your organization, and I'm really glad to have both these great folks here to tell us about how they do it. I guess, Meredith, do you want to start out?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Meredith
I'm here.
Oh, good. Okay.
I'm here. Great. All right. Hi, everyone. Hi, Leland. Thank you for the introduction. I am so excited to be part of this webinar, in part because I'm learning even more about VolunteerMatch, just listening to my fellow presenters, and also because I'm excited to share with all of you what's been successful for us here at the Sacramento Tree Foundation. So I'm going to keep it pretty basic. I basically have 2 bullet points. Why I like and continue to use VolunteerMatch, and then what I found has worked on our end to really make events pop and to bring in volunteers. As we know, there's a lot of other opportunities out there that people are looking for, so there's lots of competition. One of the major reasons why I like VolunteerMatch is that it's well known. I think people know it's a resource and they really use it as a resource. Here in Sacramento, we have 2 other major volunteer opportunity kind of clearinghouses, I guess you could say. And between those other 2 and VolunteerMatch, VolunteerMatch really brings in a good number of volunteers on a consistent basis. And I think consistency is really key. I know when I post an event, often 1/3 or more of our volunteers will come from VolunteerMatch. And oftentimes we have last-minute events, and I only have the time to list it on a couple of my usual online sites. I always post a volunteer match because I know I'll have a good response. I actually was just talking with a staff person here at the Tree Foundation this week. She's worked here for about 13 years, and we were commenting on the fact that only in the past couple of years, since we've really been utilizing some online sites, specifically VolunteerMatch, that we've had a very strong volunteer base. Sometimes we're actually fielding volunteers to other local organizations when our events for the weekend are completely full, which in contrast to a couple of years ago, we often were struggling to fill our 40 or 60 volunteer spots for an event or for a weekend. I'm sure I'm talking to people who are all VolunteerMatch users, so this isn't necessarily new news, but I really appreciate that posting to VolunteerMatch is so easy. As you can see, there's a great format. It's really intuitive. The fact that you can include pictures, I think, is really key because it's one of the first things that the volunteers see as they cruise the site. My next item I actually have starred 3 times on my notes, and that is being able to manage my own posting in real time. You can edit as needed. It comes live immediately. If I see a spelling error or there's a little change that needs to be made to directions or something that volunteers need to know, I can jump right in. I can do that myself, and I don't have to wait for an administrator on the other end to change that. So that's really nice to have control of my event. Second to last, I'm sure that we all have a volunteer waiver of some sort. It's really nice to be able to attach documents. I know the Tree Foundation here, we started attaching our volunteer release to our posting, and this has greatly cut down on our printing in-house. It's also made check-in at events much faster because volunteers are coming with the form completed and they aren't having to arrive at the event and then fill that in before we get things started. So that's been a huge benefit for us. And then last, I think having the ability to see the number of times a posting has been viewed, maybe we'll have a chance to see that on the screen, is a great way to see if your posting is working or not. If it's not working, go in and change it. If you see that your posting has been viewed 100 times, but you've only had 2 referrals, great opportunity to assess how you can tweak your posting to engage more volunteers. So those are kind of the 5 simple reasons why I personally enjoy using VolunteerMatch. They provide great volunteers on a consistent basis. There's a great format, easy to use. I can manage my posting in real time, attach documents, and I can see if my posting is working or not. Those are huge.
Great. Thanks. Oh, I was just going to, Meredith, I was just going to show people where they can see the page views that you were talking about.
Oh, great, great, great. I definitely refer to that quite often.
This is a demonstration account, so we don't always have the best numbers because hopefully we don't get referrals unless we are actually using an example. But here you can see the referrals to page views that Meredith was talking about. So page view is when someone opens up your listing or clicks on your listing to see the whole listing from search results. And a referral is when they actually click that I want to help button. So Meredith makes a really great point. Go in. Is your title working? Maybe you're getting a lot of page views and people are coming into your listing, but then they're not clicking that I want to help button. Maybe you need a stronger call to action, or maybe there's something in there that is putting people off of your listing that maybe you could go up and clear up or reinforce. Or we know, especially if you're in a major metro area, that after a while your opportunities will fall down in search results. So using the Community Leader Program, you can repost your opportunity, which means to bring it back up to the top of search results. So if you've been getting great response for a while and then you find that you're not getting such great response, go in and repost your opportunity. Bring it back up to those first few pages.
Definitely, and that's something that I use more and more, and especially as there's more competition for our limited number of volunteers in a given area, is, hey, if 200 people have looked at this and I only have 5 or 6 referrals, there's something I'm doing, obviously, that isn't getting people to click that I want to help button. So what I'm usually posting for here at the Tree Foundation are One-time planting opportunities for us, it's usually, our average Saturday event. It's 9 to 12. People can, come. They spend 3 hours with us, and off they go. Hopefully, we'll see them another time, but it's not required. And the other is internships. So people who are looking to volunteer on a more regular basis or do some more involved projects with us. I'm not going to lie, it's definitely tough out there. There are a lot of organizations looking to engage volunteers. Here in my office, we often joke about how we're competing with everything from puppies and kittens at the shelters to foster youth and sex trafficking, and all of those issues have an obvious inherent urgency to them. So I think our part is to identify why people should volunteer with us as a tree organization. What do we have to offer? So, for example, with the Tree Foundation, some of the things I like to focus on are the fact that we're family-friendly. We take children 6 and older, unless otherwise stated, like in the example that we had on the screen earlier. We're a feel-good. There's an obvious, visual, tangible change in the site after we've planted trees, and it's simple and easy for volunteers to volunteer with us. So I think one of the things to consider is, what's your niche? The executive director at the Tree Foundation here, Ray Trethaway, he often says, it's not just about the trees, it's about the people. The trees will get in the ground. What are we offering to people outside of just planting trees? So again, is it that it's family-friendly? Will they have the opportunity to explore a place that maybe is not usually open to the public? Or is it a good match for a large group that's been looking and looking for something and can't find anything else? And then capitalize on that. The second part of what I was going to share, go ahead.
I just want to make sure we have time for Andy to talk as well. So do you have just a couple more things that you wanted to say?
Maybe I'll just throw in one other thing, just kind of to reiterate how important the title of your event is. I think, having a catchy title is the first thing that volunteers see. So if you can throw in like Get Dirty With Us, or if you're working in a wildlife refuge and you can throw that in, those are all great things. And then definitely using the community leader tools to the best of your ability is just going to make it easy for the volunteer and bring you the best people.
Great. Thanks so much, Meredith. Andy? We'll go ahead and hear from, yep.
Hi there. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks so much, and thanks for having us on today on the webinar. I'm also very excited to be a part of this and to share some of Friends of Trees' experiences with online postings and with the VolunteerMatch system. I think a lot of what I was going to say has been said. I think a lot of us have the common tips and things we've learned. But to go back over some of the things about VolunteerMatch that is really useful to me, Meredith touched on it a little bit, that you can have this real-time updating. I think that's really helpful to see a lot of other sites you might submit, and then they have to go through and some other user somewhere else puts it up at some future date. You want to know when yours is live. And seeing those statistics is really helpful too. Sometimes you're challenged because you see these numbers of views and you only have a few referrals sometimes, and it makes you instantly say, what am I not doing right? So that's something that's helpful. There's the interface update. I think this year VolunteerMatch has really beefed up its interface and made it much more user-friendly. I was privileged to be part of the kind of test process last summer and making the flow of this much easier. Some sites obviously are very jumbled, so I think the way VolunteerMatch has laid it out is very user-friendly for volunteers and for volunteer coordinators as well. And now the link to arbordaynow.org is even more useful, that we're having this exposure on a wider scale. We use VolunteerMatch. We use a number of other online sources as well. There are some in Portland that are more local, that are more heavily used by people in town, but VolunteerMatch is definitely a useful tool in the quiver, and I think everybody is out posting on as many outlets as possible. Some of the things that we like to focus on with our online postings, we have 70 different public planting events from November through April. at Friends of Trees. And so it's hard to post all of them, and we can only choose some certain ones each weekend to focus on, especially for VolunteerMatch or ones where they're event specific. There's other sites we will post all 3 or 4 events with the locations in one listing, and that can get jumbled. So one of the things we've learned is to really be consistent. We can try to be unique with the different titles. It's hard to be unique 70 times over the course of a year. So we try to nail down what is the most important thing to put in these postings, and I think consistency is really important. Making sure that people understand what is needed from them to be prepared for the weather, for instance, in Portland is always a challenge. We plant at the wettest time of the year here, almost guaranteed to be rainy and chilly. And that doesn't necessarily keep people from volunteering, but we do want to make sure that every posting talks about wearing, dressing for the weather is what we say, wearing sturdy shoes or boots. And we tell them that we provide the gloves and the tools for them, and I think that helps build some predictability. It helps to build some trust with the volunteers to know what they're getting into. Putting yourself in the volunteer shoes, you have these events that online, if you've never volunteered with an organization, you don't have an understanding of what that event's like. So you want to give it in the shortest time amount possible. You want to give them a good idea of what they're going to expect. I think that we all understand that people volunteer for different reasons, but it's all about relationships and individual communications, and so you have to look to your online postings to really start that conversation. Having someone say they want to help and they want to come to you isn't the end of it. It's just the start of a process. So you want to use language that encourages them to feel like it's a personal relationship. So we always end with something positive, inviting that future interaction with them. I think the exclamation points in odd places like the posting we saw when you have a unique, something unique about your event is something that's catchy and also can draw people in. It's a little more informal. Again, I think people want to have some kind of connection to a person on the other side of that post. So I always try to put myself, as Jennifer said, view your listing as a volunteer and step away from that. That's really important to do. And we want to just convey also what Friends of Trees is about in our postings, so that consistency. We want to make sure everybody who's seen these so many times over the course of the season are starting to learn about us. So even if they don't volunteer with us this one time, they're starting to see the same things. They understand that what we're about. So when they do come out, they know what to expect. We're a very friendly group. We're all about fun and safety. And planting the trees properly is always like the third down on our list. So we want to make sure that people understand that they're welcome pretty much any ages, any ability levels. They're going to be guided by trained volunteers. We don't ask for pre-registration, so a lot of times our postings are just presenting the information about when to meet and where. And you get yourself there, and basically we'll take care of the rest. It's a turnkey volunteer event. So we focus more on making sure we're reiterating timing in our posts as well. Even if there's like VolunteerMatch says, the time and date down below, we like to put it in the body of that because we want to make sure that we grab people's attention right up front and put that in bold. And also just a tip to have people show up a little earlier than when your planting starts, so you do have that inevitable overlap. So I think those would be the things in a really quick exposition about what we look for in our online posts. A lot of the other stuff was covered very well by Jennifer and Meredith. Yeah, be personal. Use that as use each listing as an attempt to educate the public about what you're doing, even if they don't volunteer with you that first time. And just try to use that to build predictability and trust and start that relationship with your volunteers.
Thanks, Andy. You make a really good point of trying to reflect what a volunteer can expect, sort of that culture or the tone of your volunteer opportunity in your listing. By, you guys do potlucks and have coffee and all kinds of great stuff, and it's very welcoming, and that's in your description so that a volunteer can get a sense of what it's going to be like when they show up before they show up. I think that you do a really great job of that.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the potluck lunches, I didn't even mention that, but for one of our programs, every event ends with a lunch. And so we talk about what do people get out of it. This is a Saturday morning. Their time is valuable, but we always provide hot coffee and breakfast in the morning. And there's always a lunch afterwards. We're a community building organization that plants trees. And so the people, it is people first, like Meredith mentioned. It's really about people. And yeah, putting that in the listing is almost more important than talking about the trees and what they're actually going to be doing that day.
Great. Well, I wanted to just quickly do a little summary. We talked a lot today about how a volunteer learns about your organization on VolunteerMatch. Both Meredith and Andy have talked so much about making sure that you're creating that welcoming environment, inviting volunteers in, that it's more about people necessarily than trees, but it's also to make sure that you're including that need, that impact statement, how people can make a difference, how they can get dirty and change their community or make their community a prettier place for everyone to live. I think Meredith talked, and both Andy and Meredith talked today about making sure that you outline those deal breakers, reiterating, Andy mentioned that start time in a couple of different places so that volunteers get that to sink in. And then really we're talking today about crafting those opportunities that will attract the volunteers you need. Look at what you're doing. Look at what kind of response you're getting. Provide changes or feedback. Get feedback from outside your program to make sure you're doing the best job that you can to really get those volunteers that you need. I wanted to, Mary had mentioned that there is access to the Community Leader account, which is our premium tool, and you can get that today by contacting our support team at arbordaynow_support@volunteermatch.org. And if you want help with your listing, if you'd like us to review your listing, you can go ahead and contact me. I'm happy to reach out, review your listing, provide some feedback if you'd like. So you're welcome to contact me or our support team if you'd like more information on how to get the Community Leader subscription through the Arbor Day Foundation. And then we are recording this. Mary, do you want to talk a little bit about next steps? Are you with this webinar?
Definitely. And for next steps, basically like what Jennifer was saying, if you want to participate in that community leader status, email them and they can get you set up. And what we're going to be doing is the Arbor Day Foundation will be publicizing all of these events and everything coming up through different ads that we're going to be placing in different places. There will be a national press release. It will be in all of our resources now as a way that people can actually get engaged. So expect to have people coming to your site or to your volunteer opportunities through the arbordaynow.org volunteer center, and to have hopefully a lot of new volunteers getting involved. So if you have questions that are specific to how you post your opportunities, feel free to email that website or the email address that's listed there now. If you have questions that are related to just questions on nonprofit organizations or how to connect with volunteers or anything like that that would be related to the Arbor Day Foundation, feel free to email me. My email address is mwidhelm@arborday.org. That's MWIDHELM@arborday.org. And I'm happy to reach out to you and connect you with whoever in your area is working on the same sort of projects too. So thank you everybody for your participation, and thanks especially to the Alliance for Community Trees for being here and encouraging people to, their members to get involved. Thanks to Meredith with Stack Trees and Andy with Friends of Trees. You know, we couldn't have the reach that we do if it wasn't for great nonprofits like you. And so thanks for all that you guys are doing, and thank you VolunteerMatch for setting up this great site.
Thanks everyone for joining us today, and we hope you have great success finding the volunteers you need on VolunteerMatch. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.